What is up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Breathe and Air podcast, where everyday action meets extraordinary mindset. We have a special guest today, Miss Claire Admire. Thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you, Mason. I'm really honored to be here. I can't wait to talk.
Yeah, we got connected through, a mutual friend, and I looked at your stuff and I'm like, wow, this is awesome, and it aligns perfectly with the podcast. And you mentioned this a little bit in pre-show, but I want you to go into it. Tell everyone a little bit about yourself and kind of how you started.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I should start where I am now. It's been a crazy journey, but currently I live in Little Rock in Arkansas. I own a yoga studio that me and my best friend opened in the middle of the pandemic last July. Great business decision. Everyone agreed. They were like, yes, this is the best time. So I'm a yoga studio owner here in Little Rock. I teach yoga. I also do personal training. I've been involved in gym and gym life since I was in high school. I was a high school athlete, and it's always been a passion of mine. And over the years, that really evolved and took on different forms like yoga, Pilates. I guess I'm kind of a movement junkie, so I've really gone across the spectrum with that. But yeah, coming from a background where I moved all the time growing up, my family was very transient, and I learned how to get into a lot of different situations and kind of slide right in. And I think that's a big part of what informs my philosophy on life now is getting wherever you need to go and just learning to be comfortable there. And the practice of yoga is really something that's helped me adopt that philosophy and truly try to embody just blooming wherever you're planted.
Yeah, I love that. And we definitely have that in common. I moved so much growing up. My dad's job moved us quite a bit. So I
Mm.
lived and moved in weird times. Like I moved in sixth grade, eighth grade, and then
Oh, the
like
worst.
for high school. So, like trying to make friends, hormones, all these things, and girls. And I'm just like, oh, what is going on top of like trying to fit into new environments. And I look back now and wow, it really helped me and built me into who I am now. But at the time,
Whew.
not having it.
They call it character building from what I hear. Yeah, it's a difficult thing to navigate, but I think depending on the person, it's either taken as an opportunity for growth, which it clearly has been for you, and learning how to talk to a variety of different people and really be curious about life. And, just like anything else in life, it can also turn into something that keeps you stuck and keeps you down. But I'm all about just moving forward with whatever you're being handed.
Yeah, absolutely. So what were you involved with as far as athletics growing up?
You're not going to believe this. No one does, especially when I say I live in Arkansas. I was a competitive sailor. I'll say that again, sailor, as in water in a boat.
Oh,
This was during a stint in Florida where I lived for my junior and senior year, sophomore and junior year of high school. And we had a sailing team, lived on the coast. And funny enough, that is the sport that I did like on a national level, which is just hilarious to me now because it has no application to where I live at the moment. But before that, I was a swimmer. So I guess I've always been involved in water sports,
water.
and I still love to swim as a way to meditate and relax and do something my body is really comfortable with.
Yeah. I am so drawn to the water. You mentioned earlier, and I don't know if you want to go into more detail.
Yeah, no, I think we can. I think I know what you're going to say.
So you just got back from vacation, and you just mentioned like people are more happy by the water.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I don't know where I came across the statistic. People are going to have to Google it and make sure that there's no Snopes article for it. But I have seen that people who live by the water are measurably happier than people that don't.
Yeah.
And I think we were kind of joking. Part of that might be because you have a lot of money if you're living on the water, let's be honest, in the most cases. But I think there's something so primordial about water. And if you trace our history as humans back to the very beginning, it's kind of where we all came from. And there's something very sensual and very calming and nurturing about water and as an element in and of itself. And I think people are just really drawn to that. Who doesn't become instantly relaxed and serene when they look at an ocean? right? It's kind of impossible to be mad on the beach.
Yeah, it really is. And I've heard multiple things, and I don't want to go fact checking because people are gonna be like, yeah, you said something wrong here. But there's definitely something to do with like the polar pull of the ocean and how powerful
Mm,
that is. And then also I heard a fact the other day of like your parasympathetic and your sympathetic nervous system, and being able, when you look in portrait mode, right, at something, so you're looking at like a landscape. Obviously the ocean is massive. When you look at it, just huge landscape, goes on forever. You're going on a hike, you're at the top, you're looking at a landscape. It is going to help you feel relaxed. It's going to hit that parasympathetic nervous system more so than if you're really looking at something like really minute. You're focused on something, you're bringing your vision, your actual vision into something to focus on. Then that's going to really bring your attention there versus like relaxing your body, which I thought was really interesting. Just looking at something visually would even, spark your parasympathetic nervous system. It's crazy.
absolutely. I mean, I don't know if you've heard of face yoga before, but there are actually exercises that you can do with the muscles in your face and specifically around your eyes, where you're shifting your vision to look farsighted, like out onto the horizon. You're zoning into something really far away, and then you're letting your vision soften, and then you're coming in closer. And I think in today's society, because we're always right here next to our phones, and we're always right here on the laptop. I mean, Zoom is wonderful, obviously, but it has its downsides, right? We're always zoomed into that microcosm view. And yeah, just being able to step back and take the macro view and like take it all in, let your periphery just relax and the muscles around your eyes relax. There is something so sedating about that. So I think it's a lot to do biologically, but I mean, emotionally as well, just having that sense of relaxation, literally, your parasympathetic nervous system kicking in there, taking over, helping you calm down. We need to do it more often.
We do. And I was so intrigued by this, and breath work, the way this works in, we can go into this, definitely ties in with yoga, but
Oh, sure.
even a simple tip of there's parasympathetic fibers in your lips. So like
Mm.
even just, which is weird when I read this, but I've
Right.
places, so I'm sticking to it. You rub your finger just like softly across your lips, like that actually can ignite your parasympathetic nervous system because of the fibers. So like weird, techniques of visual or, actually feeling something, breath work, like all these tools that we innately have as humans to help regulate stress, which is the number one killer in the world. Like
Absolutely.
we would want to, utilize these things that our bodies naturally give us.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's something I'm really passionate about. I'm glad we're getting into it really quickly here, kind of on accident, because I think yoga is a practice that's all about subtlety. And of course, tuning into you could say, ancient tools that our body has, but also just simple tools that are built inside this incredible body that we do not give enough credit to on a day to day basis for what all it can do. Because honestly, I think we have so much external technology right now that we don't have to rely on the internal technology so much. And that's why I'm passionate about bringing people to a yoga practice and keeping it consistent in my own life, is because it's a reminder that many answers are found inside, and we can do incredible things either by changing, our mindset, either by addressing and watching our emotional state, or, biohacking to a certain level, and just knowing that this breathwork technique that takes me 5 minutes is going to lower my cortisol enough so that I can go to sleep and not wake up 3 hours later because I'm having some crazy stress spike. It's so applicable to everyday life. Yeah.
Mm.
It's the little things.
It is. It really is. And when I started getting into that world of biohacking and going in to look for answers instead of all this external validation, whether it is external medicine or, external validation for likes on our phone or what people think or how's this person going to view me, and started going inside more for answers. Like a lot of things became clear, but I am a very physical being. Like I, played sports. I love training. Like we all feel physical emotions.
Absolutely.
Emotions manifest physically. If you get nervous, your palms might start sweating. Your arms might start sweating. If you're cold, you get the chills. Like these things, your heart rate elevates, blood starts pumping. You feel emotions physically. So to think that we can't, have these tools, and it's crazy because once I started using these tools in everyday life, I'm like, wow, this really works. Like these things work before, a big sell or before a nervous situation, before that conversation you didn't want to have,
Mm.
whatever it may be. And like, I'm sitting there in my car, like doing deep nasal breathing. Like
Yes, getting that nose breathing on.
really is a,
Totally. Well, one of my favorite books is something called The Body Keeps the Score. And you might have come across it with some of your other guests. It's by Bessel van der Kolk. Really weird name, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. The Body Keeps the Score. And it's all about how, we don't have this separate physical body and emotional body and mental body. It's all integrated. Just like we can't say that when we're doing a workout, we're only targeting the quadricep with this movement. False, because the body is a connected being and it's an organism that does not exist in exclusion to its other parts. So we're absolutely hitting other things when we do, Bulgarian split squat or whatever it is. So just like, a trainer would know, oh, there's multiple pieces going into this movement, there's multiple pieces arising in every moment, emotionally, physically, yeah, mentally, and it's all
integrate.
integrated. And the only thing that holds us back from seeing that and experiencing that in a very embodied way, I think, is usually all up here in the head. And we talk ourselves out of these things by like being concerned about our likes, being concerned about ego. And I am definitely not a yoga teacher that is like, get rid of the ego, it's useless, like dissolve it, you are nothing. It's attractive in a certain sense, but
Yeah.
we have ego for a reason. And I think it's important to recognize that, embrace it, and have a healthy ego so that you can go out into the world and do incredible things. We have to have that to, perform our roles. But I think we do tend to get really caught up in just viewing these things in isolation.
Yeah. I heard a hot take. I think it's super interesting. I've been thinking about it.
Ooh, dish it.
I agree with you on the ego side as far as not totally dissipating it to where it's nothing and like we are just nothing, but using it in a healthy way, a healthy relationship to your ego. I think definitely it's success. It's a tool for success and confidence, I think, but you can't let it get too nasty because it can.
You certainly, or at least in my opinion, what I've learned in my short life so far is that the ego has to be supported by some sense of spirituality, or connection is another word I think you could use there. Or else it's just a monster, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it's almost that idea of looking at yourself from like first person and being totally ego driven versus looking at yourself from almost third person, like out of body as your character, and like not being so attached to everything that happens. Like if you're just watching yourself almost from a third person point of view, like you're not going to be so affected if a guy cuts you off in traffic, or like if you didn't get the job, or if that girl dumped you, or guy dumped you, or whatever it may be. Like you're just gonna be like, oh man, that kind of sucks. Like, and then you'll move on. But if you're so
Yeah.
in like that ego mindset of first person, like everything that happens to me, I'm so attached to, then it seems to really like drag you, and you just get dragged all over the place.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you completely hit it on the head. You get it. Yeah. It's in yoga philosophy, a term we use for this is self-observation. And it's just a practice. You can do it while you're meditating, while you're sitting, of literally just observing. How am I when and I say I as an ego, as in mind,
Yeah.
how am I when I'm not interfering with anything? When I'm simply noticing my responses without any judgment, my physical sensations without any judgment. And to me, what this means in like an actual yoga practice or a meditation session is like, I don't get to attach to the pain that's in my hip flexor at that moment because I smashed a leg day the other day. Like, I don't get to just sit there and have this pity party of like, oh, my right hip hurts and like, how am I going to compensate this later and like roll it out? Not that that's not something to think about and address, but there is a time when you do need to just step away. And of course, that's a silly example. It could be something more serious too. Like, what am I going to do about this relationship? How I'm angry. Like, what is this anger about? And then it boils down to, no matter what it is, just sitting with non-judgment during your self-observation. And I think that's a piece that we kind of miss in the West that I've really appreciated about some of this Eastern philosophy. We come from a very medical background in the last century or two. And that's wonderful. We have one of, the best, most innovative, you know, teams of doctors and medical systems. We won't get into healthcare, but like we've come up with a lot of stuff. And I think what we end up missing is that it's not just about figuring out our personality type and our strengths and weaknesses so we can become this superhuman that's like perfect at everything, just automatically knows what to do all the time. Even though that's kind of implicitly implied in a lot of Western messaging. Take this so that you'll be this way, do that so that you'll become this better person, this better version of yourself. And I think people forget that that's not actually the goal of self-observation or meditation. We don't have to turn into superhumans. We're still allowed to be very fallible and very emotional and to have like very human responses to life. But like you said, it's all about taking that information first without judgment, first just observing and being like, oh, this is anger, or this is like gut-wrenching heartbreak, or this is elation. And then instead of just responding, automatically, we sit with that and decide how we want to respond to the situation. And that in and of itself, I think, is a superpower.
It is. We spoke briefly on Alex. This just reminded me of something we talked about in Alex's episode that really stuck with me, was just that life is a constant, inhale and exhale, like the seasons, uh,
Yes.
the way that we feel. You're not going to always wake up feeling this way. But when you are operating from that God consciousness, or whatever you want to call it, that, separated consciousness from your external circumstances at the moment, you're able to realize that and feel it and know that it's okay to feel these things, and then let it go, that exhale, right? And it's like, we're not here saying self-help or whatever you want to call. I hate self-help, but whatever
Totally.
we're talking about, like, you're not going to have a bad day if you meditate. No, meditation is like a tool. Yoga is a tool. These things, taking care of your body, is a tool. They're all just tools, because life is life, and things are going to get thrown at you at all different angles.
Things get shitty sometimes. Yeah, absolutely. And I loved Alex's episode. So for anyone that's listening that hasn't gone and listened to that one, this is me pitching it for you. It's amazing. Something that when he was talking about that inhale and exhale that I started thinking about was this idea that my yoga teachers handed to me. And instead of inhale and exhale, we call it purification and growth. So there are these cycles in life, just like you would design a program, a cycle for someone's body of like, oh, we're going to lift this much these weeks, and then we're going to change the lifts and the volumes to this because we're looking for whatever effect. Life is very similar. There are periods where you're going through a growth process. Things are expanding, things are coming in, you're holding all the things, you're taking all the things, you're doing all the things. But then there are these periods of purification where we're taking away. Like if you've ever done an elimination diet, then purification. If you've ever like cut out caffeine for a few weeks, purification. And same goes for obviously, taking a break from social media, taking time off to do a private retreat. There are periods in our life where we need purification, we need stillness, and to let go of excess. And I think, at least in my personal experience, that can cause some anxiety when you feel that coming on, because it feels like something's wrong. Like, why aren't things growing? Why aren't things developing? But when we accept that that is a beautiful, natural, and necessary rhythm of life, there's nothing wrong. It's
Mm.
fine. Let it happen. Let yourself be purified.
Yeah, I love that. That's very well said. And it's so relevant to what we deal with on a daily basis now with so much stimulus. Like you mentioned caffeine. I've actually been thinking about doing a caffeine cleanse because I need it.
Bless you.
At least a week. I've heard 1 week
Okay.
it'll reset your body a little bit. That's a side note.
Yeah, no, that's the same timeline that I give people when they ask me about it, and I feel kind of guilty because I think the last time I took a week off from caffeine was probably 4 years ago. So
I know.
it's time for me as well.
Yeah, I want to take a break from caffeine. About to go work out. Go get a energy drink or something.
Exactly. Get your pre-workout into your bottle. Mm-hmm.
I think I'm a
Mm-hmm.
pre-workout junkie. I'm a
Oh no, you got a problem, Mason? We need to talk.
We're gonna switch to non-stem, okay? We're gonna switch to
Okay, yeah, there you go.
how we feel. Leg day though. Leg day will hurt.
I mean, I am very curious. Like, you were an athlete, and what sport did you play?
I played football in college, but
That's right.
played a little bit of basketball there for a quick stint. But yeah,
So, I mean, that, especially at the collegiate level, is like insane workouts and an insane need to have energy available for all your training. So, I mean, is that something that you think you can keep up with forever? Or is it something that you think is very like situation dependent where you're trying to meet a goal? So you're going all out? I mean, what's your personal
yeah.
view on that? Just like the intensity level?
I think it's for me, it became therapy. I like the training aspect of football. I like seeing my body evolve. I like the way I felt, the endorphins when I was working out. I like the training aspect. There's some guys that I know that hated the training aspect. They loved football, so they trained really hard for that. But the biggest difference for me was when I got out, I was able to focus less on I guess applied training for some things that I would do specifically for football, I would no longer do. And my body would thank me for it. So I've kind of learned to listen to my body more. And I think the other biggest thing was really dialing down how I ate. In college, I was
Mm.
the number on the scale because weight was a huge thing. Like I had to really stay around a certain weight so that I could not get eaten alive out there and stay
Oh my
healthy.
gosh, yes. I mean, in football especially, I I'm resonating with that because, and I kind of asked because there was a time in my life where I was very hardcore with the exercise and very intense with needing my body to look a certain way. And this was a time in my life when I was doing like beauty pageants. I mean, I was in the Miss America system when I was in college for the scholarship money, which was fantastic. And, you know, a side effect of that is that you do have to go on stage in a bikini. So I just think back to those times of having to really hone in your attention and say, this is the goal and it's going to take this much. And
Yeah.
this much is a lot, but there's a time frame on it. We're going to get it done to the best of our abilities, meet that goal, hopefully, and then allow things to rest.
Yeah. What do you think that did for your psyche and for like women now that are dealing with all of these Instagram models that aren't even real? Like,
Oh
how,
my
as a
gosh.
woman, do you deal with that physical image in today's world?
You know, luckily, I don't know where it came from exactly, but I have always been fairly confident and just being out there as myself, I guess. Call it a stubbornness or an independence. So for me, I think that I, you know, didn't struggle as much as my other friends or people that I know who the situation of being on stage,
Yeah.
you know, basically in your underwear would be terrifying. I just didn't give a fuck. But you know, I'm also I would say very privileged in that I've for the most part, never really struggled with being overweight. My metabolism type is fast. And I say that because I think people look at someone like me who's a little bit naturally thin, and it's easy to think, like, oh, I've got to look like that because clearly, if you just put in the work, that's what you look like. And the reason I don't look like that is because I don't put in the work. And you know, unfortunately or fortunately, that is simply not true. People
Right.
look the way they look. Obviously, we want to be healthy. Obviously, we want to work out. We want to maintain a healthy weight for our bodies. But, you know, I guess from a young age have just always known that there's a big level of fakeness to all of this, and not even fakeness in a negative way. Some people are beautiful and blessed and great for them. And, some people are going to have to struggle a lot more with body image issues. And, not to say that I haven't had struggles, there have been plenty, might have been more mental, but overall, going back to your original question of like just how that impacts women as a whole, not just me personally, I don't think it's great, to be honest. Now looking back, it seems really silly to me. And at the time, it was a beautiful process. It was something I needed. I love performing. I love singing. And that really was what drew me in, because there was a talent portion to it. It's so cheesy, but basically I just wanted my own talent show. Okay. So I learned a lot, and I still have a very soft spot in my heart for the Miss America organization, because I grew a lot as a person. But I think that it's just so ridiculous now, the way that women and men are portrayed through social media specifically, and media. It is almost to the point where I don't know if people believe it anymore. Do you think people are still buying in? Like, this is just what I look like naturally.
I hope not.
It's so hard. I am a very cynical person. I'm a stoic. So I guess I look at that stuff and I'm just immediately writing it off in a way. But I know, working with clients, and especially working in personal training, that issue of self-confidence when it comes to comparison is a huge, huge problem for most people, and to myself, obviously, in other ways, maybe, but definitely
Yeah.
to myself as well. I think it's attributed to Theodore Roosevelt. I don't know if it was him or not, but he said comparison is the thief of all joy. And I think that really does ring true, especially when we consider how the things we're comparing ourselves to in media and online are fabricated
Mhm.
in some way or another.
Everything is. I highly suggest anyone to do this, but I over the last 2 years or so have really just started hitting the unfollow button so much.
There
Anything
you go.
came up on any of my social media, which by the way, I will confess I use too much already. So
Same.
much. And then I was like, okay, I use this too much. Now, anytime I see something that I don't like the way it makes me feel, and it's something that isn't giving me value in one way or another, I'm going to go ahead and just get it off. And it changed so much the way that I looked at social media, and the way that I would feel from social media. I love Twitter. I don't know, a lot of people don't, but I really like Twitter. I
Such a millennial.
forum. I like the community there. It's a little bit more connected, I feel like, than just people posting pictures. But like that for sure. Like I've gotten so much value, friends, connections, people who are on the same, wavelength as me, people who think similarly. Um, I think it's so important to do a purification of your social media, to look through that stuff and be like, if I'm going to use this, let's make sure that it's serving me and I'm not serving it.
Absolutely.
Time.
Yeah. And I even just had something similar myself, where I went through all the people I was following and just mass removed a lot of people. Sorry. And then I also went through people following me, because I've had my Instagram account, like probably a lot of other people our age, for like 10 years now. It has traveled with me through a long time and a lot of phases of life. And, I just got to this point just in this last month where I was like, am I attached to the number of followers I have? I think I might be. So I went through my list and I just removed, I think, over 500 accounts that were either like junk, dead accounts, so like people who hadn't been on Instagram, or just like guys that followed me back in the modeling days of like bikini photos. I'm like, you're going to be removed now. So there was something very, sounds so silly and ridiculous in light of other problems people have in their life, but there was something really therapeutic about seeing my number of followers go way down. I was like, wow, I did not think this would actually affect me in any way. And I'm now having to reconcile, like, okay, public image, going down. And again, purification. Like,
Yeah.
how can I lean into this and accept that it's something that for whatever reason is right for me right now and that I apparently feel like I need to address in my life. So that, yeah, social media, it's so much to navigate, but we just do the best we can.
It is. When I first started on my journey of, pushing the podcast and being unapologetically me and sharing my thoughts and trying to help people in the best way that I thought I could, that naturally comes with an outflow of people who see this and know you from the past and like, Mason, what the hell are you doing? Unfollow, right? And at first that would bother me, but the more that I stayed true to who I was, the more people that would unfollow me or follow me, I knew I was getting closer to, the goal, closer to helping more people. My vision and my mission was growing regardless. So I like stopped caring about it because it was like, I know I'm getting closer regardless because I'm being authentically myself. And
And I
and
think
that's freeing.
absolutely. Yeah. I think once you realize that all I have to do is show up as me and be authentic, because at the end of the day, that's the only thing that's going to satisfy our deepest desires and our deepest needs. It's just being authentic.
Mhm.
You know, fuck them. Like, if people aren't on board with that, let them go. And people will go. And I think that's something that you just have to be okay with. And kind of going back to just women specifically and how we compare ourselves and how we view ourselves and build an image based off of an online reality, for the most part. I think that's something that we can struggle with just when we are trying so hard to be pleasing and so hard to be popular in whatever way. We lose that sense of ourselves trying to please everyone. It's like you said, you just have to be authentic. And then the people that are following you, that are interested in your messaging, are really going to be there for you. And
Yeah.
it's not about followers or, having this macro reach. And I'm happy for people that have accomplished that for themselves. But one thing I've realized myself just over this last year, maybe the quarantining got me thinking small, but you don't need that big of an audience. We have tricked ourselves, I think, into believing that you have to have hundreds of thousands of people following you for your messaging to be effective and for you to change lives. And, you know, as someone who works day in and day out with people one-on-one coaching, that's just not true. You could have 5 people in your sphere of influence and make a huge impact.
It's a domino effect. It really is. You impact someone else's day and then they take that energy and then they may impact someone else's. And then it just goes. And you never know those small things that you do throughout the day that you may not feel like you're doing much. It's incredible and one of the best feelings when people come back and tell you that. And so many times they're not going to tell you. Like they're just going to feel it and they're going to take that energy and they're going to move on with their day. But know that that's still a huge impact that you're creating. It really is. I love that. Great segment. Boom. Love it.
Yes, done. Forget about social media. It's fake. Moving on.
On. I'm really interested in how you got into yoga and how you got into this practice, especially from, what you just told me about your past and kind of transitioning into that. So tell me a little bit about your journey with yoga.
So, yoga really found me in a certain way. I practiced since I was a teenager. I say practice loosely. I was an athlete. My coaches told me stretching was good for me. There were yoga classes at a local gym. I think it was some hybrid yoga thing, like a sculpt yoga class type deal, one of those. And so I just was like practicing at a gym for the stretching, literally to complement my athletic training. This was back in high school, and around the time that I was 16, my life just kind of fell apart in a big way. And a lot of it stemmed from my parents' separation at that time and just having some really severed relationships happen in a very short amount of time. It's just hard for a 16-year-old to deal with.
Of course.
And I definitely took it out in really negative ways and took it out on myself. I was cutting myself from the ages of like 16 to 18 or 19, just as a way to cope with the emotions I had. I didn't know what else to do with them. When your life gets upended and something really dramatic and unexpected happens, and you have to deal with the fallout of that, I think at a young age, it can go really badly. And for me, it was going pretty badly. I definitely had to come to terms with what is anxiety, what is depression, because apparently I have all of those things happening emotionally and in my body. I'm clearly looking for releases in really unhealthy ways. Is there anything else that I could be doing? Like, what? This cannot possibly be the answer, because I think it'll just end up with me killing myself if I continue this way. So, what can I do? And this is a journey that took, it really unfolded over like 5 years. So, not to say any of this healing was done overnight, but it started with therapy. It started with just talk therapy, seeing someone who just sat me down and was like, hey, what's going on? And I highly recommend therapy for everyone. Honestly, I think we all need it. We've all been through hard things in our lives, and our body, our mind, our soul is holding all of these responses to the traumatic events we've had over our lives. So therapy was the place that it started for me. And then I just felt like I was doing so much psychoanalyzing, and that was kind of turning into really trying to self-improve. This is, a little more specific to my personality. I like to be very outward. I love for people to see me. I love to be seen and, help people and work with people. And it really turned into something that felt like it was inflating my ego in a sense. Not that therapy does that for everyone. And there were other factors at the time too, like competing in beauty pageants, for example. But at a certain point, I realized that just talking to a therapist wasn't enough. I was still struggling. And at this time in my life, fast forward, I've graduated high school, graduated college, I'm in grad school, I'm living life at breakneck speed, just trying to get things done. And I was so stressed out. I was so anxious. It was showing up as like binge drinking on the weekends and coming in and out of relationships just to have some kind of distraction. Nothing was feeling centered or drawn from anything authentic or healing in a way. It all just felt like a distraction from what was happening, from the feelings that I was still trying to stuff down from like when I was 16.
Mm.
And one weekend I was just randomly in Seattle visiting family and came across a bookstore and picked up a book on Buddhism, of all things. It was a scientifically geared book. It's called The Bodhisattva's Brain, if anyone wants to pick it up. And it was just talking about, here are like the scientific benefits to like someone who practices Buddhism in this non-dualistic way of thinking. And I honestly don't even remember much of the book other than it just unfolded this lens for me, a different way of looking at life and a way of accepting how things were without needing to change it, which was sounds so simple, but it was a game changer. I grew up in a pretty religious household, grew up in the South, so that's probably enough said for some people. And, religion was a way to manage emotions and to manage like guilt and things that you'd done wrong, the way I was taught it growing up. And your goal was to be better all the time. You didn't want to mess up and sin, and you wanted to be like this great person that didn't have any problems. And I had to let go of all of that and really have this painful shedding of my worldview and come into this new, fresh sense of things are okay as they are. I don't have to change myself. I just have to be present for what's happening and give myself a little more space, not only to respond, but to actually process and be okay with everything that is. So after I picked up that book, I met my now husband, who was a yoga teacher. I was just getting into yoga again in kind of a new way. I was taking classes at different studios and was starting to pick up on the fact that there was more to yoga than stretching. That was a new idea to me. I had no idea about the history of yoga. It's like deep, rich history in India, as well as all the influences that have brought it over to the West and transformed it for us here. And once I started practicing in that way and I met my teachers, the people that would become my yoga teachers at the Circle Yoga Shala, I mean, that was really it. I went to that 200-hour training, which is like the first training that you do when you become a yoga teacher. And I think I just remember crying mostly through that training, like just having several breakdowns in private and public of like, oh, the last 4 years that I've spent psychoanalyzing myself were so important and so necessary, but now it's time to evolve into a more holistic view of myself. Like we were talking about earlier, being able to step away as a third person and just watch what's going on instead of being so deeply entrenched in your mind and like trying to figure out your thought patterns and like, why did I do this? And why did I do that? There's so much gold there. I'm not discouraging people from that
Yeah.
step at all, but I think at a certain point, you might realize that even that is kind of futile work. It's not actually making you happier after a certain point. You just have to embrace something that allows you to sit with it.
Mm.
So that's my very long answer to how and why I came to yoga. Essentially, I was just falling apart as a person and knew that I needed something to ground me down. And it needed to just be a shift in the way I was thinking
Yeah.
about myself. I needed to be kinder and more
I love
open.
that. I totally agree with the over analyzing thing. I think for a lot of people who are ambitious, driven, if you're listening to this podcast, you want to get better. Like you're searching for wisdom, for knowledge, for something to give you that spark, that edge. And a lot of times those people are up here a lot in between the ears.
Totally.
And I think what I mentioned earlier, like therapy is, weights or training is therapy for me. It helps me it's a release. It's a positive release. I call it my positive addiction, right? It's positive release. And through diving into that through meditation, cold water therapy, like all these other modalities and things that you can do to get out of your mind. But I heard it said this really opened my eyes when it was told to me this way. People often think of meditation as something where you are trying to have no thoughts, right? You want no thoughts in your head and you're just sitting there, your fingers you got the three pieces coming up.
You got your mudra happening.
You're not like nothing's going on up there and it's just peaceful. But in reality, it is that thoughts are coming and you're seeing them and you're watching them go, and your thoughts are coming, you're watching them go, until eventually it is calm and you are separated totally from that and from your mind, and you will get there. But at first it is like you don't want to sit still, you don't want to quiet your mind. Like there are things that are coming in and out. So I think being able to realize that that's part of it, that's part of the process of actually being still and separating from this meat carcass that we have on, right? It's something that takes practice, but there's so many different ways. And I think yoga combines that with the meditative side, the breath work side, and then the getting out of your mind and into your body, and the physical aspect, the challenge that it brings of being present. Because at the end of the day, that's what, if we're anxious, if we're angry, it's usually because we're not here. It's usually because we're thinking about that last thing, or we're thinking about the thing that's coming. And those things don't even exist. Like they're just in our minds. Like the only thing that exists is here and now. And so that's why I think yoga, cold therapy, these modalities, these things allow us to be focused here.
Absolutely. I mean, you just perfectly described why I think a lot of people come to yoga, and certainly a reason why I'm enamored with it, because you are getting a physical aspect to it. And there are plenty of people that come to yoga just for the movement and the exercise, and I welcome them. That is so fine. It has so many benefits for your body. But when I'm teaching students, I'm definitely interested in at least letting them know that there might be a little bit more to it if they're not already tuned into that.
Mhm.
And it doesn't even have to be the super woo woo, like, oh, you're going to hear angels singing in your head and your mind will empty as soon as you hit Shavasana. Like, no, this is about being in it. This is the most real thing you can do, actually, is just to sit with your pain, your heartbreak, your discomfort, your joys, your tribulations. That is living life. And I absolutely love when people tell me that they can't meditate because they're bad at it. Because going back to what you said, people think like, oh, you sit down, your mind empties, and you're just kind of nothing for 20 minutes or 5 minutes or an hour. And it is not that at all. It is still real life. You still have to deal with all those thoughts coming in and out. And, I think it was either Eckhart Tolle or Michael Singer. I'm conflating the two books now, but they described the feeling of meditating, especially as a beginner, as just all of a sudden sitting down and realizing that you have this roommate who's sitting on the couch next to you. And by God, they're just talking all day. Like, this couch is uncomfortable. I'm hungry. Do we have pizza in the fridge? I don't like this show. Oh, I have to call my mom later. Like, can you imagine if you actually had a roommate that was just voicing all that all day? But that's what we live with inside of our heads. And until we sit down and realize that, we're not going to notice it. And the process of awakening to that is so painful. And so it doesn't feel good. Meditating, oftentimes, especially when you're beginning, is not much fun. It can be the first time that you're actually seeing how much is going through your mind and how distracted you are by, like you said, things that aren't even real. How often are we caught in a future moment, imagining a situation with someone that will never come to pass? And we are getting anxious and we're getting worked up. Our sympathetic nervous system's kicking in, it's ready to fight. Until we notice, until we take the time to pause, stop, just be present and aware, we don't even know that's going on.
So true.
But that's why yoga is important.
It is. It is incredibly important. I saw you kind of in, so you've had this weight training background, and I'm interested
Yes.
in, you know, your take on training with weights versus
Mhm.
training yoga, Pilates. I see that you incorporate a lot of Pilates, which I think works hand in hand with yoga. I personally have never got on the machine other than a couple times,
The reformer. Oh, you've been on it?
a few times. So my cousin, shout out Hunter, my cousin actually opened a Pilates studio here in Little Rock and then opened one in Fayetteville, or
No way. I'm going to have to get the name so
club.
I can check it out.
It's called Club Pilates.
Perfect. I'm going to go.
Yeah. So he had one of the machines at his apartment, and this was during the pandemic, and I was like going insane because I couldn't go to the gym,
Right.
and I had to find some way to work out. I was like running up and down the apartment steps, like just trying to do something with myself.
Sweatshirt on, like, sweating it out, air boxing on the steps.
Mhm. So
What
this
did you think of the reformer, which is basically like a contraption that has straps and you move things around, and it's very awkward, honestly, when you get started with it.
it is. I really want to learn how to use it better, but I loved how it incorporates, so much core movement. First off, it's so core oriented, which a lot of yoga is as well. But also, I like that it was functional. It was functional training because I love,
Totally.
your basic bodybuilding slash powerlifting, your compound movements, your squats, deadlifts, which I think all that is very important to fit into your regimen for multitude of reasons. But now that I've gotten out of, you know, football and into more, how can I lift to make my body feel the best that it possibly can? These functional movements and functional training become more on the forefront for me. So I really did like that side of it for sure.
Nice. I love seeing a guy get on the reformer. Just, for the record, it is so fun because the amount of flexibility it requires is usually a shocker to most dudes.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, going back to your question, am the type of person who is very driven by science and research. That's the best way to convince me of anything. So, I mean, for me, it's a no brainer. Like, we need to be lifting heavy things. And it does not have to look like, oh, I'm going to max out my deadlift every Friday. It just means that you need to pick up stuff that's weighted, that has resistance to it, and you need to do it consistently,
Yeah.
meaning like a little bit every day or at least 3 times a week if you have other things going on or other movements you're incorporating.
Mhm.
But I mean, the research just shows kind of, definitively that if you want longevity in your body, if you want to have a functional range of movement and strength, again, we're not trying to be Schwarzenegger. We're not trying to like, bulk up and get crazy. I mean, good for people that do that. That's not the goal for a functional life necessarily. So, you
Right.
need the strength training. And again, going back to like my start in training, it was at a gym. It was when I was training for Miss Arkansas that I got my first personal trainer and worked with someone who showed me how to use weights, how to program stuff.
Mm.
And, the gym was definitely my first love because I'm a person who needs a lot of physical activity to stay sane. It is definitely a meditation to me as well, Mason. It definitely keeps me on the rails. So yeah, lifting weights is just something that I think every person needs, whether you're lifting 5 pounds over your head or you're doing a back squat.
Yeah.
Then what I realized, from, so I guess just kind of chronologically setting it up, I started with this resistance training, strength training, and moved into yoga. And the philosophy of yoga, like we already talked about, really is what drew me in. But I've always been kind of naturally flexible. I'm not sure why. So, just being totally honest, a big reason why the asana part of yoga or the posture part of yoga felt so good to me was because I could just do most of the things. And I think that a lot of people who end up becoming yoga teachers, if I can just generalize for a second, are thinner women who are just kind of good at doing the things. And it automatically gives you this kind of clout, which I don't think is very fair, because when we look at this student population coming in and the people that need yoga the most, it's not people who can automatically like, grab their legs from behind their head. Like, you don't need the yoga posture practice. Someone else does. But what happened actually when I started my yoga teacher training, I kind of let weights go for a little bit. And I was like, I'm really good at this yoga stuff. Let's be honest. It looks great. I'm doing great. Let me just like keep doing these postures. And then I realized that it's not actually a good idea to just stretch yourself into crazy shapes all the time. I'm someone who is a big proponent of not letting yoga be the only physical thing that you're doing. Again, the mental benefits, the spiritual benefits, I mean, you could use that every second of the day. But as far as the posture practice goes, I don't think you need to be doing these crazy contortionist shapes all the time. And it really wrecked my body for a little bit. And that is actually what brought me into Pilates, because I started realizing, oh, my core strength is really not where I want it to be right now, since I haven't been doing the strength training. And by just bending and overexerting my joints all the time and lengthening my muscles, I'm actually doing more harm than good. So I got into Pilates for the core training. And as soon as I saw what that was able to do for my body, and you're right, it's totally like yoga. The
Mm.
movements are very similar. It's a little bit stronger. You do have the resistance piece of it, but it felt very natural to me.
Mhm.
And as soon as I saw what that was able to do for my body, I was sold on it and got my training in it, and now teach it a fair bit on the reformer. And currently I'm just a big proponent of balancing out your movement. You don't need to do the same thing every day or only one type of thing. We call that a specialist. And it's great if you're a collegiate athlete, if you're training for a show and you need to be very good at one thing. Fantastic. Do that, make it your goal. But if you just want a functional life, you need to be able to do multiple things in a reasonable range of motion with a reasonable amount of strength. And that can't just come from doing,
Mm.
only deadlifts every week. That can't come from just doing hot power yoga every day. You have to balance your body out. So that's kind of my own personal training philosophy. And just depending on the client, and what their body needs, where they're at, we'll kind of blend these different modalities together to create a training plan that's really just tuned into what the body needs and not so tied down to like, oh, well, we're doing strength training, so we're only going to do these movements. I like to think in a bigger picture than that.
Right. And I agree. Everyone is very personalized, and there is no one size fits all approach to health. I
Absolutely.
truly believe that. If someone's telling you that there is, you should probably look for somebody else.
Yes. And I mean, just for example, like my back squat is shit compared to some of my clients. Like I have clients who can lift heavier than I can. And I say that because kind of sarcastically, hopefully people picked up on, was saying like, oh, I'm so good at yoga. Like, look at this. Well, I have weaknesses too. And those weaknesses are where I personally need to go in and be like, all right, I need some delts here. I need some core strength. But for someone else, it could very well be that like they have a frozen shoulder and they need the yoga. They need like more of the Pilates to fix the things that they've been overcompensating for.
Right. Yeah. Lifting weights is the only way that we can actually help our bone density. Um,
Absolutely.
Fact. So like people, when we're talking about longevity, that's literally like picking up heavy things. Like you said, I love that. Just pick up heavy shit. Like that is
Literally as simple as that.
create bone density within your bones. And you hear older people falling all the time and breaking bones, and you get brittle and all those things. So longevity wise, it's something I really do believe everybody should be doing. But I'm always telling my guys who love to just go in there and pound weights, like, make sure you're stretching, dude. Like you're gonna hurt yourself. I mean, I've gone through multiple injuries, seen guys go through multiple injuries. So it's like, guys, make sure you stretch. Girls, don't be afraid to lift weights. Like, I'll go ahead and generalize there, because
Absolutely.
for the mass population, it's like a lot of girls, there's creep dudes in the gym and they don't feel comfortable, or the guys are like, I'm so unflexible, like I can't stretch at all, I can barely touch my toes. I'm like, but you just over there squatting 500 pounds, like, come on.
Right. Come on. You can go to a yoga class and do a yogi squat.
Yeah. But yeah, it's balance. Life is all about balance in any aspect. And when it comes to that, when it comes to work life balance, when it comes to so many things that we do, I'm such a proponent for balance. And I think going all into something in spurts is good, but like you said, that exhale, that purification process, that pullback to kind of recenter yourself, that balance in life is really, really important.
Yeah.
Centered.
And not to cut you off there, sorry. Just going back to something you said earlier about your audience that listens to this. I mean, yeah, they're going to be high achievers. They're going to be like people looking for answers, right? I call them seekers. And I think that's something we can both probably identify with as well, being a seeker and being very curious and wanting to learn. And, the things I've said are really from my own experience from that perspective of having a tendency to go all out, to be very up here in the head, to be very future focused, and to want to do my best in everything and to get a lot of joy from that. And I think that with that in mind and the people listening to this, it, the balance is really the piece that's very important, because there are some people that need to go to therapy. They're not enough up in their head. They're not doing enough to think about things, but that's probably not the people listening to this. The people listening to this probably need to be told like, hey, it's okay to go chill the fuck out for 30 minutes and like stretch your hamstrings or do some breath work on your back or, journal. I mean, there's this point that the highly driven person gets to where things do start to break down, I think, if you don't find that balance. And so, yeah, obviously yoga is the path I came to find balance, but I believe there are multiple paths to that. And as long as you are taking care of yourself in a soul sense, in a spiritual sense, I think that whatever you're doing is probably hitting that balance for you.
Yeah. It all comes back to energy for me. I think that there's a constant buildup of energy within us, whether it's, positive or negative. And a lot of times we hold on to that energy and it fuels us and it drives us and it's good to have. But when too much of that gets built up and there's no release, like there's no room to think, there's no room to breathe, there's no room to do these things where we can actually clear our mind and come back to the present moment. And so there's a lot of releases when it comes to high achievers like that. Like there's people who go pedal to the metal in everything that they do, which if that's out partying and drinking on the weekends and they get into like a little bender, like they're going hard. If it's selling and doing their business and they're going hard, like you see that all the time, you know? So I think that, I mean, just back to the balance. It's so important. It really is. I think I just found the episode title, finding your balance. I think I just found that.
Oh, nice. Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Which is hilarious because just a little side note, I remember when I first told my dad like that I was going to compete in a beauty pageant. And then later when I told him that I was doing this yoga teacher training, I was going to be a yoga teacher. His first response was actually like, "Oh, are you coordinated enough for that?" So this is coming from someone who used to have apparently no physical balance, to the point where people thought it was insane that I would walk across a stage in heels or, you know, balance on one leg. It is possible for everyone. I would just like to throw that out there. You can change your your persona and a way of approaching things. But something you were just saying then, I want to offer this before I forget. There's another fantastic book. I'm a reader, if you can't tell.
But
There's a book called Self-Observation. It's by a guy named Red Hawk. And, you know, obviously, I don't know his exact birth given name, but Red Hawk. And it's all about like, how do I start to observe myself? What is that practice like? And then also, if people are really just kind of interested, piqued by this idea of self observation and want to know more about getting to know themselves in that practice, there's another book called From Fixation to Freedom, and it's by Eli Jackson Bear. And this looks at a system called the Enneagram. I don't know if you're familiar with that, or maybe your listeners have like heard that term. It's kind of become more popular in recent times. It's gotten this modern psychological flair to it now. It's kind of being marketed and sold as like this personality tool.
yeah,
I don't agree with that necessarily. And it actually came from Sufi mystics way back in the day, like ancient eons ago. And they certainly weren't interested in what your personality was, but rather the makeup of the world that existed inside of your soul and how that presented itself in an outward way. And I won't get too much into it here because it's like a whole episode on its own, but reading that book and just for really the first time in my life being like, oh, I have this way about thinking about things. I have a way that I approach life and it's innate. It's authentic to me. I didn't have to decide this is the way I'm going to be. I didn't have to decide these are the things that bother me. These are the things that I work really well with. It's just there. Realizing that I'm that way and oh my gosh, other people are a different way and that's okay. There's no different values to that. I think for overachievers or people who, you know, really go after things, you can develop this ego that has a little bit of a superiority. See, I can't even pronounce the word superior. You get a complex sometimes, you know, and if you let it get out of hand, that like, oh, well, I'm just getting shit done because I'm amazing and no one else clearly is as amazing as me, or else they would be getting as much done as I am. But when you start to look at what actually goes along with that, and not only that, but what is actually driving that, why do I feel the need to achieve? Why do I feel the need to get approval and validation from others and to just kind of fit into whatever situation arises and like kind of craft the room and craft the message to who I'm talking to? Once you start to see the machinations inside of your head and what you're doing, it really becomes less personal. It all goes back to that third person view of like, oh, maybe I'm not just amazing because I'm amazing. Maybe this is just the program I was given, and it's actually no better and no worse than the program that any other person was given.
Hmm.
And what I love about the Enneagram is it actually breaks down like 9 different types. And so it's very, very cool. If anyone's interested in that, they should look into it.
that sounds very interesting. I definitely relate to that. You know, I think what you said is spot on. I felt like you were talking about me there for a second. I'm like, She
We
does.
all have a type.
Did she do her research on me?
Well, what's funny is you start to, once you like read into this more, or just ideas like the Enneagram, you realize that there are certain types of people and they're going to do certain things, and they're patterns. There are patterns to the way that plays out. So like you can even just start to look at your friend group once you've read a book like that and think, oh, interesting. I seem to only have friends who are also as driven as me. And that's great. We need to have friends that we achieve to be like, definitely.
Yeah.
But then you might start to think, oh, how do I feel about people who approach life this way and just want things to be comfortable and easy, and they're always making peace, and they're always, just kind of riding the waves and not too concerned about where we're going. How can their perspective on life inform my own? How can I even like take a part of that and maybe not adopt it, but appreciate them, not let the way that they're acting crush my vibe or get in my way, but rather just accept that all people are different. And despite those different lenses that we have for looking at things, if we can just all come together, then we're going to look through the same lens and like accept everyone's opinions and, to a degree, and accept that everyone is just going to have a different way of looking at things. And life becomes a lot easier when you're less attached to the way that other people see things.
Mm, it is. There's too much going on in our own heads to be focused about what everybody else is doing, right?
No, definitely.
Or much less what everybody else thinks.
Oh man. Yeah. Forget trying to win that game.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, Claire, it has been an honor. These things go by so fast when you get in the groove with somebody.
Yeah, I can't believe it. I just actually looked at the clock and realized it's been like over an hour. How did that happen?
I did tell Mike, whoa. But that's one of the things. I'm really intrigued with flow state and
Mm.
how we can physically tap into it as an athlete. That's one of the things that I'm like, I knew every week on Saturdays I'm tapping in, or if it was high school, Fridays, or whenever I had a game, like I get in the zone, like I'm in flow state, boom, blinders on, nothing else matters.
Yes.
And any athlete knows this feeling, this state of being. And I've been so intrigued with how to reproduce it outside in real life. The podcast has done that for me, for sure. Like we just tapped into each other and it was like, boom, hours gone, right? Uh,
Totally.
has there been any ways like that I mean, does yoga do that for you?
Oh my gosh, I love this question. First of all, have you read this is the last book, I promise. This is the
She's a
last book I'm going to mention. Have you read The Rise of Superman?
no, but it sounds
This is literally, Mason, you got to read it. It's like 120-page book, pretty quick read, literally all about flow state. And it looks at specific athletes and people who have just done incredible, incredible things like riding a kayak down a 300-foot waterfall. What possesses someone, first of all, to do that? I don't know. But it's all about the flow state, right? At that point, because one wrong move and you're dead. So this author actually examined like different case studies and came up with a list of, I'm going to get this number wrong, I believe it's 9 qualities or 9 things that you have to hit in order to be in flow state, to be in what's considered flow state. So I think you would be very interested to check that out, and maybe your listeners too, because yeah, when it comes to biohacking and performance, which I know I've kind of spent some time almost talking about disparagingly, like get rid of the ego, get rid of performance. But that's only because I'm masking to a degree my true nature of like going all out and hitting it hard. Like I said, I started in the gym, right? Okay, so that's where I come from. I'm hardcore. So, thinking about things like flow state has always fascinated me. And that's why I loved athletics, because when you get in the water as a swimmer, there is nothing else happening but your breath going right. Your listeners are going to love that audio. Sorry, that was right in the mic. But you're zoned in. There's nothing else going on except you and your body and the sound of your breath. And even when you're sailing, and especially in, you know conditions where you really have to be tapped in. It's not just like a lazy sail on the lake or the ocean. You're like either in a regatta, you're in a competition, or there's some weather stuff that you've got to be zoned in. I love that. And that was the way I think that I originally came to kind of like a meditative state was just through athletics, like you. And yeah, flow state is something that I think anyone who, whatever, is on the fence about meditation or on the fence about like yoga, that sounds too out there or whatever. I don't want to go there. Sounds kind of spiritual or whatever. Look into flow state because it's a parallel in a lot of ways. It's a mirroring of the effect of just turning off your brain and getting into this place where you're vibing, if we can put it in modern terms, you're just vibing. And I think that can be a way for people to get into turning off their mind without, maybe sitting on a block for 30 minutes or reading a book about Buddhism.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Claire, where can everybody find you? Because I know if they've made it this far, they love you and they want to hear more. So.
Yeah, if anyone made it this far, I'm amazed. So you can find me on Instagram at Claire Admire Training. That's also my website, which is actually down right now for some renovations. So maybe by the time people hear this, it'll be up, but they can check me out there. Yeah, I may be even taking a social media break from that account for a few weeks here soon. So I feel kind of bad sending people that way, but that's where I'm at. And then if you happen to be in the area, come check out the studio. Sixth House Studio is the name of the place that we've got here in town. And there's online classes as well. So if people want to just check out the vibe and see what we're doing, you can find us there too.
Where in Little Rock are you? Because I want to come.
Downtown. You should come. And also I'm going to throw you on the reformer. I've already decided we're going to do some reformer stuff. I just honestly want to see you be pushed to your limit a little bit here. I think it would be uncomfortable for you, and that would be a lot of fun. That shows you a little bit how mischievous I am. But yeah, come on down to the studio. It's downtown off of 6th Street.
Beautiful. All right, one last question for you.
Yeah.
What is your definition of success?
For me, and you probably get a similar answer from a lot of people, but it really is about living authentically. When I can wake up and know that I'm about to go do something that I love to do, that I've chosen to do, that I've created for myself, and when I know that I have the emotional space to go through my day loving other people and being kind and compassionate whenever possible, and also being true to myself and to my boundaries and my needs, things feel balanced and things feel really embodied and alive. And I think that when I have that feeling of just knowing that I'm in the right place, doing the right thing, no matter what that is, that's success. And I think that the more you can have a flexible mindset around success, the happier you will end up being and the more satisfied you'll be with your life. Just be excellent at whatever you're doing. Yeah. That's success.
Eloquently said. Thank you so much, Claire, for coming on the show.
Thank you, Mason.
A pleasure.
All mine. Thanks for having me.
Thank you all for tuning in to another episode. You heard Claire. You can find her on her Instagram. Go tell her how much you love the episode. And as always, if you enjoyed today's episode, if you got something from it, go ahead and leave us a review and then send it to somebody. Send it to somebody that you think would help. And the biggest thing is put it into action, because we can be motivated and we can feel these things, but if we're not actually applying them, then none of it matters. So go do it. If anything, go do something that we talked about today. But thank you so much for tuning into another episode of the Breathe in Air podcast, and have a great rest of your week.